There were whispers from a hidden corner of the internet, stories too strange to be believed. At first, no one understood what they were seeing, just flickers of light, a locked room, and a camera that never stopped recording. The man behind it called himself helpful, but the world would come to know him as something far darker. His name was Marius Gustavson, the eunuch maker. His sessions were booked in silence, watched in secret by strangers at midnight. Bodies changed while the world slept, and trophies rested in freezers beside ordinary food. Then, somebody spoke. Police listened, and the nightmare began to unravel. Marius Gustavson did not always live on the fringes of legality and human limits. In fact, he started out leading a fairly ordinary life. Born in Norway in the late 1970s, Gustavson eventually moved to the United Kingdom and even worked for a time in mundane jobs. He was a postal service worker by trade. He also once had a family life. Reports indicate that he was married, but that marriage fell apart around 2016. And it was precisely after this personal upheaval that Gustavson began to dramatically alter the course of his life. By his own lawyer's account, Gustavson had long struggled with body identity issues. He felt uncomfortable in his own skin and harbored an extreme desire to alter his body. Specifically, he exhibited signs of body integrity dysphoria, a psychological condition where a person feels that one of their healthy body parts doesn't belong to them. In Gustavson's case, he felt that his male genitals were foreign to him. He later described wanting to look like a Ken doll down there, referring to the smooth, featureless crotch of the toy doll. This startling notion would become the seed of his transformation. After the breakdown of his marriage, Gustavson's fixation intensified. No longer tethered by a conventional family life, he sought radical ways to achieve the body he envisioned. It was around this time in the mid-2010s that Gustavson discovered online communities devoted to extreme body modifications. In particular, he stumbled upon a subculture of men known as nullos. The term nullo stands for genital nullification, and men in this niche community voluntarily have their penis and testicles removed to live as eunuchs. To most people, it's an almost unthinkable desire, but to Gustavson, it was a revelation. He wasn't alone in wanting to eliminate his sexual organs. Others shared this particular dream of bodily freedom. This realization would set the stage for everything to come. Emboldened by the nullification community and driven by his dysphoria, Marius Gustavson made a fateful decision. He would nullo himself, no matter the cost. In early 2017, at age 39, Gustavson arranged to have the very surgery that most would consider nightmarish. Lacking any access to legitimate medical help for such an illicit procedure, he turned to the underground. In February 2017, with the assistance of an acquaintance, reportedly a male escort he had met for this purpose, Marius underwent an unlicensed DIY surgery to remove his own genitals. The scene was as chilling as it sounds. In a private residence in North London, Gustavson was allegedly strapped down while a makeshift surgeon removed his penis with a kitchen knife, all of it captured on video. It's very likely that his testicles were taken as well. After all, his goal was total nullification, but sources focus on the dramatic removal of the penis in that session. In that moment, Marius Gustavson ceased to be an ordinary man and became, literally, a self-made eunuch. The experience seemed to ignite a mission in him. If he could survive this, why not help others achieve the same transformation? Gustavson soon took to the internet, not to hide what he'd done, but to announce it. On specialized, extreme body modification forums, he introduced himself as an experienced nullifier and offered his services. He claimed he could perform castrations and penectomies on volunteers, just as he had done on himself. In essence, Marius Gustavson self-actualized as the Eunuch Maker, a nickname he proudly embraced as he started seeking out willing participants for his unorthodox practices. Unbeknownst to anyone, this was the genesis of a clandestine operation that would run for years and leave many lives irrevocably changed. What began with one man's personal obsession quickly evolved into a small underground network of extreme body modification enthusiasts. Gustavson's online posts attracted attention. A handful of like-minded individuals from the UK and beyond gravitated toward him. Some were volunteers, eager to rid themselves of their own genitals. Others were interested in the technical and voyeuristic side of things. Soon, Gustavson had gathered a circle of contacts willing to participate in or assist with illicit surgeries. By late 2017, Gustavson had launched a dedicated website for his enterprise, pointedly named Eunuch Maker. On this site, he advertised unlicensed services for castration and other extreme procedures. It was here that he began to live stream the gruesome operations for those who dared to watch. In essence, Gustavson turned his obsession into a pay-per-view horror show, hidden in plain sight on the internet. To run this operation, Gustavson enlisted several accomplices, effectively creating a dangerous underworld ring. These included men from various walks of life. A few of them were the same people who had helped mutilate Gustavson's own body, while others were new allies he recruited. Among his inner circle was Peter Waits, a 67-year-old retired chemist from Surrey. Janice Atkin, 38, a man in Wales who had been training as a veterinary surgeon. Jan Valentin Sicour, 30, originally from Romania, but residing in Scotland. And additional associates in Wales, such as 61-year-old David Carruthers and 32-year-old Ashley Williams. Each had their role in this bizarre venture. Some assisted in performing crude surgeries. Atkins's veterinary knowledge, for example, was presumably useful for anatomical procedures, while others helped with filming, logistics, or even storing the illicit materials that resulted from the operations. As the network solidified, Gustavson's operation picked up momentum. Volunteers came forward from the fringes of the nullo subculture, willing to let this untrained team perform irreversible surgery on them. It's important to note that these individuals technically consented to the procedures. They fervently wanted to be rid of their genitals or otherwise mutilated. But, as we will see, consent in such extreme circumstances is a murky concept, and it did not spare anyone from the devastating consequences. What made Marius Gustavson's scheme especially unusual was how he commercialized the carnage. This wasn't done in total secrecy for only personal gratification. It was also a business. Through the Eunuch Maker website, Gustavson offered tiered subscriptions to viewers across the world who paid to watch these extreme procedures in real time. In effect, he'd created an online pay-per-view channel for live castrations and amputations. Amazingly and disturbingly, there was indeed an audience for this content. Over the 4 years that the site was active, from 2017 to 2021, it attracted approximately 22,000 subscribers from around the globe. Viewers would log in to see videos of men's most intimate body parts being cut, crushed, or burned, a sort of content that defies imagination. Gustavson ordered membership levels ranging from free access to premium VIP packages costing up to £100 for exclusive footage. The business was busy and lucrative, as prosecutors later described it. Indeed, financial records would show that Gustavson and his cohorts raked in hundreds of thousands of pounds from this enterprise. Between 2017 and 2021, Gustavson personally earned nearly £300,000 from subscriber fees and payments. Gustavson's streaming sessions typically took place in improvised operating rooms that were anything but sterile or safe. Sometimes he used his own North London apartment, turning it into a gore-splattered studio. Other times, he and his co-conspirators rented hotel rooms where they would meet clients and perform procedures away from prying neighbors. Wherever the location, they set up cameras to ensure that paying members could watch the action from the comfort of their homes. It's reported that 22,841 user accounts were registered on the site, a mix of one-time thrill-seekers and dedicated fans of the eunuch maker's dark content. The site's very existence was an open secret in the body modification community. Gustavson promoted his services blatantly on forums, bragging about how professionally he could perform a castration with minimal blood loss. In a 2022 interview with an Irish newspaper, he claimed to have personally helped 58 men achieve genital nullification. He even boasted that he kept the removed body parts, the penises and testicles he cut off, stored in his freezer or preserved in jars of alcohol. These chilling trophies were, to him, proof of the professional service he was offering. Gustavson insisted he used proper tools, like the Burdizzo clamp, a device normally used by veterinarians to castrate livestock, to crush testicles bloodlessly, claiming he carried out procedures in a very professional way. Of course, none of this was overseen by any medical authority, and the reality was far from safe or humane. The procedures Gustavson and his collaborators carried out read like a catalog of horrors. According to court evidence, he was directly involved in at least 22 mutilations on other people. The victims, all male and often vulnerable, endured irreversible surgeries at Gustavson's hands. Among the documented acts were castrations, penectomies, genital torture, nipple and tissue removal, and the freezing of limbs. All of these acts were carried out with makeshift instruments and gross disregard for medical protocol. Police, who later searched Gustavson's flat, found kitchen knives, scalpels, syringes, and anesthetic kits, a wooden chopping board, and even a mallet among his tools. They also found a bodyboard with straps, essentially a makeshift restraint table, to hold down writhing patients during the agony. Gustavson did sometimes use local anesthetic to dull the pain, but given the screams reportedly heard in some videos, it's clear that many procedures were excruciatingly painful and dangerously amateur. Victims often writhed in pain, bled profusely, and later required emergency medical care. Some were left incontinent or with other lifelong complications due to their damage. Yet incredibly, the live audience craved this grisly spectacle, and Gustavson delivered more. As if the procedures alone weren't shocking enough, Gustavson injected an even more twisted element into his show: cannibalism. During the 2024 trial, Prosecutors revealed clear evidence that Gustavson had, at least on one occasion, cooked and consumed parts of the flesh he removed. He had reportedly cooked human testicles and served them as part of a salad. Gustavson also kept various body parts in his personal freezer as trophies, storing dismembered penises and testicles in plastic bags and containers at his home in Haringey, North London. Pictures shown in court depicted some of these remains chilling in his fridge next to everyday food items. And he was not the only one in his network to do so. When police later raided the home of his associate, Peter Waits, they found a container, a butter tub, in the fridge that held a human scrotum and 2 severed penises inside. A label on the tub read, "Do not defrost," a darkly ironic instruction for such horrific contents. There were even indications that Gustavson attempted to sell some severed genitalia online to fellow extreme fetishists. The line between reality and nightmare had fully blurred in this enterprise. What began as purported body modification had descended into outright depravity and crime. Throughout Gustavson's 4-year run as the eunuch maker, the people undergoing these procedures were often described as willing victims. Most of them actively sought out the castrations or amputations, driven by their own psychological issues or fetishistic desires. However, describing them as simply willing masks a deeper truth. Many of these men were emotionally vulnerable and psychologically fragile, and Gustavson proved adept at manipulating that vulnerability. He was, as one prosecutor later put it, an arch manipulator of vulnerable individuals, a man who could talk someone into doing the unthinkable to themselves. By 2021, Marius Gustavson had been running his eunuch maker enterprise for around 4 years, and it was only growing bolder. But the clock was ticking. The police now had a complaint and a branded, mutilated victim as evidence. They launched a full investigation, codenamed Operation Victor. Detectives in the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Crime Command began quietly monitoring Gustavson's online activities and gathering intelligence. They likely infiltrated the eunuchmaker.com site or obtained its records, which would have revealed the vast user base and possibly real-time streams of illegal surgeries. Undercover officers might have posed as prospective clients or subscribers to witness the ongoing crimes. Investigators soon identified not only Gustavson, but a web of co-conspirators spanning different parts of the UK. Surveillance and electronic evidence linked the suspects together, revealing the scale of the conspiracy. After months of evidence gathering, the police were ready to strike. In late 2021, they executed a series of coordinated raids and arrests. Gustavson was arrested at his home in North London in 2021 when Operation Victor moved in to shut down the operation. At the same time, officers swooped down on his associates. Arrests were made in London, as well as in far-flung locales like Newport in Wales, and even in Scotland, where one accomplice lived. In all, 9 men, including Gustavson, were taken into custody during this sweep. What the police discovered during those raids was the stuff of nightmares. In Gustavson's residence, officers found exactly what the tipster had described and more. There were boxes of medical-grade needles and syringes, vials of local anesthetic, scalpels, and makeshift surgical tools scattered about. They found the grotesque restraint board with straps stained from prior use. Perhaps most chillingly, they opened the refrigerator and freezers to find human remains, preserved genitalia from prior victims stored among food items. Each item of evidence told part of the story, the extent of planning, the disregard for human suffering, and the ghoulish trophy-keeping habit of the eunuch maker. The raids on the other conspirators yielded similar evidence. In Surrey, Peter Waits's home yielded that infamous butter tub hiding severed genitals, a key piece of physical evidence tying him to the crime. In Newport, Wales, police detained Janice Atkin, Ashley Williams, and David Carruthers, finding clues that they had organized or hosted some of the illicit surgeries there as well. Laptops, external hard drives, and cameras were seized, containing what detectives later described as thousands of hours of horrific material. The video recordings of countless mutilations. It was enough evidence to make even veteran investigators recoil. But they meticulously cataloged everything for the looming court case. As details of the arrests broke in the press in March 2023, the public reacted with shock and fascination. Headlines labeled Gustavson the eunuch maker and outlined a story that seemed too grotesque to be true. A bald, bearded man in a wheelchair accused of leading a wide-ranging conspiracy to castrate and mutilate men on camera. People struggled to understand how such a thing had been happening for years under the radar. The case also spurred conversations about consent and mental health, with some observers noting the paradox that these victims had sought out the harm. One commentator sardonically asked why this was different from other extreme body modifications people consent to. But British law was clear and precedent was on the Crown's side. One famous case, R. v. Brown, had established that consent is not a defense for serious bodily harm in the UK. Gustavson and his crew would face justice under charges of grievous bodily harm and more. Legal proceedings for such an unusual case were complex, but by the spring of 2024, the matter had reached London's venerable Old Bailey Court. Rather than a dramatic trial full of witness testimonies, the case culminated in a series of guilty pleas, a testament to the overwhelming evidence gathered by Operation Victor. Marius Gustavson himself pleaded guilty to numerous charges, including conspiracy to cause grievous bodily harm with intent, 5 counts of causing grievous bodily harm with intent, making and distributing indecent images of a child, possessing extreme pornographic images, and possessing criminal property. 6 of his co-defendants also admitted their roles, pleading guilty to the grievous bodily harm conspiracy or related charges. In early May 2024, the court convened for a sentencing hearing that would reveal the full sordid story for the record. Judge Mark Lucraft KC, the Recorder of London, presided. As he listened to the prosecution's summary, even he, a seasoned judge, seemed struck by the sheer depravity of the facts. He labeled Gustavson very much the mastermind behind a large-scale, dangerous, and extremely disturbing enterprise, emphasizing that none of the men had any medical qualifications. The judge noted that the video footage Gustavson uploaded was extremely explicit and clearly aimed at viewers' sexual gratification, demonstrating that the motives were not altruistic or purely therapeutic as the defense weakly suggested. I am entirely satisfied that the motivation of all those involved were a mix of sexual gratification as well as financial reward, Judge Lucraft declared from the bench. The prosecutor, Carolyn Carberry KC, did not mince words either. She described how Gustavson preyed on vulnerable men and lured them into barbaric procedures for his own perverse ends. She highlighted perhaps the most jaw-dropping revelation, Gustavson's flirtation with cannibalism, recounting how he had cooked what appeared to be human testicles and served them as food. The courtroom winced at this detail, but it drove home just how far beyond the pale Gustavson's behavior was. Carberry also detailed the artfully arranged platter of a human testicle salad, the trophies in the fridge, and even how Gustavson had branded his paying customers with EM initials, like cattle, reinforcing that this was cruelty of the highest order. On the other side, Gustavson's defense attorney, Rashvinderjeet Panesar, attempted to provide an explanation for Gustavson's actions. Panesar argued that Marius suffered from body dysmorphia, integrity disorder, and that in a twisted way he believed he was helping others find peace by modifying their bodies. He noted that Gustavson began altering his own body after a personal crisis and his marriage's collapse in 2016, and that he thought there were more people out there who wished to do the same to themselves. The defense claimed Gustavson even said he wanted to put a smile on other people's faces. He wanted to help. It was the portrait of a deeply disturbed individual who perhaps rationalized his acts as a service. However, given the brutality and profit involved, the judge and prosecutors were entirely unconvinced by the notion that this was benevolent in any way. As the authorities pointed out, Gustavson's operation was primarily for sexual kicks and money. Any help to others was incidental or imagined. When it came time for sentencing, Judge Lucraft delivered a heavy verdict. Marius Gustavson was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 22 years to be served before any possibility of parole. This means the eunuch maker, who was 46 at sentencing, will be in his late 60s, at least, before he might breathe free air again. And likely, given the severity, he may never be released. The judge's sentence sent a clear message. Society would not tolerate what he had done, even if some victims had asked for it. Gustavson's 6 co-conspirators also faced stern punishment. The sentences reflected their varying degrees of involvement. Peter Waits and Janice Atkin received 12 years in prison. David Carruthers was given 11 years. Jan Valentin Shakur received 5 years and 8 months, and Ashley Williams and Stephen Scharf were sentenced to 4 years and 6 months each. Additionally, remember the 3 men who directly performed surgeries on Gustavson himself? They had been dealt with separately a few months earlier. In January 2024, the courts sentenced them for causing grievous bodily harm to Gustavson. Damian Burns, the man who took a kitchen knife to remove Gustavson's penis on February 18, 2017 on video, was jailed for 5 years. Jacob Crimmy Appleby, who at just 19 years old had helped freeze Gustavson's leg in 2019, leading to its amputation, received 3 years, 8 months in prison. And lastly, Nathan Arnold, who partially removed Gustavson's nipple in 2019, got a 2-year suspended sentence. As Gustavson was led away to begin his life term, one can only imagine what was on his mind. This was the culmination of his life's darkest pursuit, and it ended with him branded not as a visionary of body freedom, but as a violent criminal. In the wake of the sentencing, the story of Marius, the eunuch maker Gustavson, continued to reverberate in the media and public imagination. The sheer oddity and horror of the case led to extensive coverage, not only in news outlets but also in documentaries and online discussions. A true crime docuseries titled The Eunuch Maker aired on Crime Plus Investigation UK in 2025, delving into Gustavson's tale for a wider audience. People around the world shook their heads at how a seemingly consensual subculture could produce such cruelty, raising uncomfortable debates about the limits of personal autonomy, the fine line between consent and coercion, and the role of mental illness in extreme body modification. The case also highlighted the existence of fringe communities on the internet where almost any desire, no matter how destructive, can be fostered and facilitated. Legally, Gustavson made one last bid for freedom. He attempted to appeal his sentence in 2025, arguing through his attorney that the punishment was too harsh since those who underwent the modifications consented to what was done to them. But a London court flatly rejected this appeal in April 2025. The judges upheld that consent was not a valid defense for what amounted to heinous crimes. With that, Gustavson's fate was sealed. He remains incarcerated, and given the nature of his offenses, he will likely serve the bulk of his life behind bars. No longer will he be able to harm others under the guise of helping them. The eunuch maker stands as one of the most bizarre criminal cases in recent British history. It is a story that almost defies belief. A man driven by personal demons who found an outlet in the suffering of others. A thriving, if clandestine, market for violent fetish content. And a network of accomplices who enabled each other's worst impulses. It showed how modern technology, streaming video, and online forums can facilitate ancient horrors. After all, the concept of eunuchs and castration cults dates back millennia. But here it was happening in 21st century London for paying viewers. It also underscored the importance of law enforcement adapting to fringe internet subcultures. Without the victim who spoke up, Gustavson might have continued his butchery even longer, hidden in plain sight on the web. In the end, what lessons can be drawn? Perhaps it's a cautionary tale about the extremes of body autonomy. While society increasingly respects individual choices, there are limits, for good reason. When those limits are crossed, we venture into a realm of harm that impacts everyone involved. The individuals, the enablers, and the wider community that must grapple with the fallout. Marius Gustavson believed he was providing a service to people like him, but in truth, he was exploiting fragile minds and leaving human wreckage in his wake. The eunuch maker will go down in infamy as a man who turned his personal nightmares into reality for others and paid for it with his freedom. Thanks for joining me for this unusual and unsettling episode of Fridays with Tony. As of today, the eunuch maker site is long gone. The subscribers dispersed and the gruesome surgeries stopped. Those who were harmed have to live with their decisions, some perhaps still convinced it was right for them, others filled with regret. And Marius Gustavson, the architect of it all, sits in a prison cell, a cautionary figure of how dark and dangerous the pursuit of an obsession can become. The tale of the eunuch maker is a stark reminder that some lines should never be crossed, and that the role of justice is sometimes to protect us from our own worst desires. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.